we have here in the chamber today Ukrainian-Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops.
That 15-second snippet from the House of Commons on Friday has brought so much ridicule and condemnation to this country. The fallout from what happened on Friday continues. Now, the Speaker of the House, Anthony Rota, has resigned. Of course, he did that yesterday. That's effective at the end of today in the House of Commons. But the embarrassment from this episode continues. Let's talk a little bit more about this episode, what it means, with Ida Yudin, Vice President of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. Ida, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, what was your reaction? I know that, it was this weekend, of all things that you want to be contemplating, it's a story like this. Can you tell me your reaction when you saw and heard what had happened in the House of Commons?
I think this was really a stain on Canada, and a really disappointing moment. I think that the Speaker Rota correctly resigns, and that's a step towards addressing the situation. But it was really, people are talking about how this impacted the Jewish community. Of course, as Jews. This hits quite hard, but this is something that impacts all Canadians.
And you just said there, the Speaker's resignation is a step, and not the end in and of itself, right? So tell me about what else has to happen here with the gravity of this error, mistake, whatever you want to call it. What else do you want to see?
So, we think that now would be an appropriate time to task Canada's War Crimes Program to review and consider any new evidence that has come to light from the release of archival material that further implicates those who committed wartime atrocities who are now living in Canada. We talk about the Duchesne Commission. It was about 40 years ago. A lot of new material has come out, and it's time to examine the information we have access to and ensure that justice is done.
Do you think more people need to answer for this? Because what I struggle with is it can't just be the Speaker. Somebody wrote that speech for him. There are other people that knew what was going on here. There had to be, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Maybe it's one man and one man alone. I'd love your thoughts.
I think you're asking questions we've all asked ourselves. Yeah. I think the bigger question that we need to be looking at is, what is happening in our education that allowed something like this to happen. We've talked a lot and we've called across Canada for mandatory Holocaust education, world history education. We had a case last week where it was clear that, more education is needed, not just for people to understand, a blip in history or a moment of history, the impact of what happened, the context of what happened, the facts of what happened. We're seeing too many incidents that reflect this dramatic need for education, paired with a worrisome rise in anti-Semitism around the world. And Canada and Quebec are not excluded from this rise of anti-Semitism. So we're seeing all these things happen at once. And I think now it's time for us. And, one thing I can say is in the case of the House of Commons, in the case of the court case last week with a precedent-setting judgment, our systems are working. So errors are being corrected and being caught, but we need to be a step ahead, and we need to focus on education and ensuring that this generation doesn't lose the lessons of history.
We're with Ida Yudin, Vice President of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. Ida, I'm glad you brought up the criminal case that in Quebec courts last week. And for our listeners, you were in fact booked originally to talk about that on the show this week. And then, of course, we got sidetracked by the embarrassment in the House of Commons, okay? So I just want to ask you a little bit on that, right? Because so last week we did see a man sentenced. He was convicted of promoting hatred against Jews. He got 15 months in jail, 3 years of probation. A lot of people are saying the judge in this case basically threw the book as much as possible on a case like this. What's your reaction to that it was taken so seriously this time around?
So look, if you follow this case closely, the Crown and the judge saw fit to include our testimony. I gave a community impact statement during the sentencing hearings. And, the concerns of the community were absolutely heard. But the judge really took his time to ensure that he weighed the tools available in the justice system and the huge and clear hate motivations of the actions of this individual in determining a final sentence. And this sentence sends a super strong message, and I'm really pleased to say this doesn't, to begin with, the anonymity of the internet is no shield for those looking to promote hate. You can't just hide somewhere, write a few articles and say you didn't really do anything. This demonstrates to those who would seek to promote and foster hatred, anti-Semitism through social media, and we know that's a big problem, that there are real consequences, that it's a real crime, and disseminating and promoting hatred is not welcome in Canada. At CIJA, we've been calling for online hate legislation for some time, and we're hopeful that the federal government will move forward and table something. But until that happens, this is the flip side. We struggle with how to deal with hate online and social media. We know that online hate leads to violence. And here we are in a situation where we see that the court has sent a strong signal that this is not acceptable and that there are real consequences.
I want to wrap up with, and we just talked about an egregious case of anti-Semitism in this country, but I want to wrap up with what I feel is maybe even more dangerous because it's so much more pervasive. And when I look at our politics in this country, the Green Party and the NDP, they will regularly, at policy conventions, come up with statements and do things. They say, well, this has nothing to do with the Jewish people. It's about Israel. And they'll come out with condemnations of Israel as a country. And they'll put it under the guise, well, this is not anti-Semitism. This is about the country of Israel, right? I see that all the time. The Liberals, over the last couple of years, how many instances has it been where they hire someone who is known to spread anti-Semitic tropes or anti-Israel policy, right? So I see that, and it's kind of been like in left circles, boy, it seems to be very pervasive. And I wonder if you share the concerns that I have on that and what we see in our politics in this country.
So I'll tell you something. We are really concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism, and that's why we're convening the largest conference of Jews from across Canada this October in Ottawa for that very reason, to deal very specifically with the issue of anti-Semitism. It'll include networking, speakers, panels, and face-to-face meetings on Parliament Hill with our parliamentarians to send a strong message that anti-Semitism is on the rise, that it's an issue that we are all accountable for, and that we have to find a collective solution for. And you're right, all too often, anti-Israel, there's a difference between legitimate criticism of Israel, which is completely acceptable and normal as in any situation, and, using situations and events in Israel to either target Jewish communities around the world or to delegitimize the existence of the state of Israel. And, it is something that we are concerned about that we're pushing hard against. If you want information about our conference, it's at www.fightit.ca. But I come back to, there's a common theme on all of these issues, and it's education. In the case of the court case last year, it was a neon sign that we need to provide training for prosecutors exactly about what you're talking about, the definition of anti-Semitism, what it means, the codes in hate crimes. All too often we see hate crimes brought to the courts. And there's a code and a vocabulary, whether it's anti-Semitism or hatred targeting another group. It takes a solid understanding of the issues involving those communities to use the tools in our justice system effectively. And that's why we're also calling for training of prosecutors and identifying a number of prosecutors who would be those to deal with issues of hate crimes. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it begins with people like you who make the time to talk about these important issues.
Ida, listen, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm glad we took the time this morning in the show, and you're always welcome here. Be well. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
That's Ida Yudin, Vice President of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs.